Some time ago, a man came to us with a game based on procedural generation that could create infinite worlds and would let you do absolutely anything. He promised us the moon and the stars. He promised them at E3. He promised them on Stephen Colbert's show. He promised them everywhere. And that man's name was, well, right. Yeah, Sean Murray wasn't the first developer to do the whole procedural generation is gonna be the future thing, and the hype train that sort of derailed afterwards. The last time this happened was with a game called Spore, which was in development just like No Man's Sky for a long time. Though, actually, to be fair, I'm gonna try and limit the preferences to No Man's Sky, mostly because, well, although Spore was a very divisive game that split the gaming community in two, there's one thing I can say for certain about Spore that I can't say about No Man's Sky. It's actually fun to play. So, Spore. Development for it started a very long time ago in various stages. It was sort of an evolution of the idea of Sim Earth, only it didn't simulate just Earth, it simulated everything. Like the first title for it was Sim Everything because it simulated everything. Like it went from single cells to that single cell inventing a spaceship after a billion years of evolution, and then going about the universe doing all sorts of crap. That was the core idea of it. Sure, over time it devolved actually. It lost some components, it didn't have underwater civilizations anymore, and someone at EA decided, hey, this amazing game that could be quite good, let's dumb it down for kids. Pro tip to all game developers, kids aren't morons and kids grow up. So if you dumb down a game, if you make it cute and cuddly for kids, believing that somehow that's a good thing, just don't. I mean, Spore does start out with a good idea, but then it evolves into this absolute horse shit. Now I ask you, what the hell is that? That's a game for preschoolers or something. Which is fine, yeah, okay. Make the game accessible, yeah, it is. Spore is already very accessible, but what the hell was that? Are you just trying to jiggle keys in hopes of getting attention? But back to the idea. So, Spore. This is a game where you started out as not a single cell entity, you had several cells actually, you even had eyes, and you would very slowly evolve. First, you evolved by eating stuff, depending on what you were, a herbivore, an omnivore, or a carnivore. You would have to eat plants or other creatures, all the while evolving, all the while getting new components that you could, not graft onto your body, but assign to the next generation. And you would control, for the most part, one individual in that generation that would continue on and on and on, sort of like Assassin's Creed, only not as a flashback. It went from the cell stage to the early creature phase where you developed your first legs, where you could go around and explore a planet, a procedurally generated planet, on which you would sometimes see crap like UFOs going about. There you would see other creatures that you could try and befriend if you knew how to dance and how to sing and how to... It was heavily inspired by Fable in the whole non-verbal communication aspect, although, to be fair, it didn't have farts, so it was already miles above Fable. Also, the idea that creatures communicate non-verbally through song, through movement, yeah, that's actually a thing, so yeah, that actually worked. You were still able to modify your creature at this stage, making it better suited for combat, better suited for socialization, until the brain of the creature would just get bigger and it would decide, hey, you know what, I'm sentient. I know what I am. Let's form a tribe. And you formed a tribe, and then the game turned into an RTS, a limited one where you only had a maximum of, I believe, 12 units. And your objective was to either destroy or befriend other tribes. You could destroy them by blowing up their main building. You had some weapons too you could equip, like spears and torches and axes. Or you could befriend them by going to them and singing what they wanted to hear using various instruments. Again, non-verbal communication. That's an interesting way of approaching the idea of how would an early civilization, like they just got past fashion, the first tools, would be able to communicate with another tribe that was at the same stage. Singing, yeah, singing works, and giving gifts, yeah, that works. It worked. And depending on how you went through that phase, whether you were a conqueror or a nice person, you would evolve to a certain type of civilization. You could be an industrious one, a religious one, or a militaristic one. And then the game changed again. It became about controlling resources, about controlling other cities. And in the end, you could control everyone by religion, you could control them by money, just buy them outright, or you could blow up every other city and become a ruler of the planet. But here's the thing that I actually liked about this stage, about the previous two stages. Up until the civilization point, every other tribe, every other nest of creatures you encountered was different. It was a different species. But when you get to this point, to the civilization stage, there are no other species. There's just yours. You have conquered this planet, and now you're trying to conquer your own species. To unite them maybe, or to just eradicate those who you don't see fit. That's something that honestly made me think a bit about what the game was trying to say, apart from evolution existing but there being an omniscient creator that decides where things go. The worst part of Spore was the shallowness. Like all those stages I've just mentioned, they were shallow as hell. You couldn't do a lot of stuff in them, but still, they had vastly different gameplay. They weren't that long, they weren't that interesting in themselves, but it let you see the evolution, it let you see every change you did, it let you experience different types of gameplay. It did that at least. It wasn't all just about collecting rocks. So it had diversity, but it was repetitive as hell. Now this is something I really had trouble explaining to people about. When was this game released? 7 years ago? Yeah. That a game could be repetitive, whereas it made you do the same actions again and again and again in a certain context, but it could still have diversity because you only did those actions in one phase. When you went to another one, you had other actions you had to repeat. That's, well, it didn't make Spore necessarily great or good, but it did make it interesting. It made it honestly playable, because if all I had to do was just one action, one goddamn action, non-stop, through it all, it would have been an awful game. But it's not, and now we get to the part where the game actually kind of shines. I mean, it actually does something quite well. The space stage. Bear in mind, I played this first before the Space Adventures add-on, which looks like absolute and utter crap, so I won't go into details about the ability to actually take your captain and go explore planets and talk to NPCs like you're in some sort of... It looks like a kind of MMO made for kids where you don't have dialogue because people would say bad words in the chat. This is where the technology of Spore shined. Now, technology was one of the reasons that Spore was so popular. Since it was announced, this was a completely procedurally generated game. Even the creatures were made procedurally. And the creature creator component to this day is amazing. Yeah, you look at No Man's Sky, but look at Spore. Yeah, they look all cuddly and cute because some idiot at EA decided to market it towards kids, aesthetically even, not just thematically, and because it's a game. But those creatures are very well made, very complex. They're just able to work. Like, you put hands on something and it will use them, it will pick stuff up with them. You put legs on them, it will use them, it will use wings. it will use its mouth, it will use everything. And when you got to the space stage, you saw just how goddamn big of a variety of creatures that thing can make. You would travel from planet to planet looking at trees, looking at creatures, looking at just about everything, and never find something that's the same. But the best part about this space stage is that you weren't just going from place to place looking at things and trying to look up guides on how to enjoy No Man's Sky and PC Gamer, where they basically just say, this is a screensaver, do something else, like listen to a podcast when walking through it. In Spore, you actually had a point. Yeah, I know, No Man's Sky has a story, I know the story. It's an okay story, not that much to it, but still, it's an okay story. In Spore, you had objectives, you had missions, you had a simple sort of diplomacy with other alien species, you had an enemy that would become more and more prevalent the closer you got to the core of the galaxy. But most of all, you had the ability to actually change planets. You could colonize them for one, and you could dick around massively with the ecosystem. Like, I just can't tell you how fun it is to be an utter space dick with the planet's ecology. You could introduce new species of trees that are blue, and if there was a free slot for a tree, for a large plant on that planet, in a few minutes you'll wake up to, oh look, half the trees on the planet are now blue. You could introduce carnivores, omnivores, herbivores to a planet. You could actually genetically engineer your own creatures and send them there to wreak havoc, destabilize things. You could use a supersizer that would enlarge a creature to epic proportions, which would then, well, not necessarily run amok, but it would cause problems for other creatures and other civilizations that were trying to lift themselves up. Speaking of which, you will run into supersized creatures when you are at the earlier stages in evolution, meaning that at some point another civilization may have passed through there. Like I said, you actually see some UFOs from time to time, but those are just scripted visual effects. There's no sort of interaction. One of Spore's failures was that you never actually feel like the universe is moving around you up until you get to the space stage. Until then, everything is at your pace, and I believe that's a bit of a lost opportunity, because it would have been interesting to see just how you would have fared as a tribe when someone started kidnapping your people. Because you can't kidnap people, you have tractor beam that lets you kidnap everything. You can even make a zoo and put them all in the zoo. I don't believe you can fathom how funny it is to go around and kidnap cows and then throw them into space. Well, not into space, but from a short distance from space to the ground. Or how fun it can be to see a civilization, a brand new city being formed with proud people in it, and deciding, you know what this planet needs? Less atmosphere. And you launch an atmospheric decreaser thingamajig dehydrator that just sucks up all the air. Why? To be a colossal space dick, of course. Dicking around in the space stage is magnificently fun. Yeah, I tend to cheat at this stage, because why wouldn't I? I just want to go around and do crap, and the kind of crap you can get up to is fantastic. You could color a planet whatever you wanted to. You could dig a hole so big that the planet almost looks like a donut. You are God at this point. You are indistinguishable from magic. You are divine to the people, to the really stupid, really primitive people beneath you that just run away in fear when they see your very bizarrely built ship. Because you can build your own ship, you can build your own anything in this game, your own buildings even. But you can't uplift the idiots. Like, you can't tell them, hey look, this is fire, here's how you use it. No, you can't do that, which is kind of sad. Spore in itself is kind of sad when you realize exactly to what extent this technology could have evolved had it been used. But again, this is Electronic Arts. Electronic Arts is a company that made a medieval Sims game, and when it came time to make a Game of Thrones tie-in, they made it for the non-medieval one. That's how quick they are to abandon any sort of new idea. And after some DLC and a mini expansion pack, they dropped Spore like a ton of bricks. The leadership of the company back then said that they would continue to use this technology in other games. They actually said, oh my god, this technology is going to be amazing, it will change games, and they used it in one game, Darkspore, which they closed down. What was it, last year or this year? They closed it down. Like, that game was so under the radar, I had no idea it had launched until about 6 months after. And the technology, that really nice technology that allowed creatures so complex to be animated on the fly, that's gone. We see some glimmer of it in No Man's Sky, but still, it's not the same kind of game. No Man's Sky is mostly a mining game, a resource gathering survival game, whereas Spore was, I'm not sure what kind of game Spore was actually. It's very shallow in most of its stages, that's for certain, but it tries to be a strategy adventure space sim management thing. One that could have been a lot better had they not chopped off a lot of its components, had they not limited the number of stages it had. It used to have a city stage separate from a civilization stage, but they just decided to cram them all together in a very limited package. And they did that mostly without actually telling people, who still were under the impression that this game was actually gonna be very big, very complex, very deep. I had almost pre-ordered the thing, though in my defense, pre-orders worked a bit differently back then. Had I pre-ordered it, I would have gotten it for about, $30, not 60 euros. So there was a benefit. I didn't get it because at the time I was working for the first online TV station in this country, which naturally paid diddly because why wouldn't it? It relied on people's enthusiasm to get the job done, not on actually paying them, but that's not important. Would be Spore. Yeah, it was kind of a letdown, but still, the space stage is great. You have a galaxy, an actual galaxy with millions and millions of star systems and planets that you can abuse to your heart's content. Not the gas giants, of course, that would have been too fun, like being able to ignite something like Jupiter into a sun, being able to guide your own life, your own new civilizations. That would have been fun too. Oh, this game could have been so much better. But at least, unlike No Man's Sky, it does have fun parts, like objectively fun parts. And also, although some specifics weren't available about how some stages worked, they were a lot less vague about Spore. Even about the multiplayer, they just said you won't run into other players, but you will see their creations. That's it, that they said it, and this was Electronic Arts. 2008 Electronic Arts, back when they were at the height of evil, and they were more honest than an indie dev, backed by Sony. And Spore is kind of evidence of that. I mean, it starts with the Electronic Arts logo turning to a black hole and eating up Maxis and everything that would have been good, like actually good, about Spore. Not really sure if there's any self-awareness in that. Big companies tend to not have that, and neither does the place I currently work for. And yet, Spore still lingers. It hasn't made an impact on the gaming industry, it hasn't reshaped society like Minecraft did. But sometimes you kind of remember, hey, wasn't there a game where you could make all sorts of dumb creatures that you could then turn into spacefaring civilizations? And people would go, yeah. Hey, was there another one where you would go from planet to mine stuff? What was it called again? Oh yeah, StarMade. So if you're interested in Spore, you can actually still find it even on Steam for the price of 15 euros. For that, you'll get a space stage that's honestly more interesting than No Man's Sky. And that concludes a week of all sorts of space stuff. Next week, we're going a bit medieval. If you enjoyed this show, hit the like button, subscribe, and share it with your friends. Or, if you thought it was horrible, then share it with your enemies and make them suffer. We shall be your weapon of vengeance. But if you liked what you saw, you could, I don't know, maybe donate, because basically YouTube is horrible at revenue, by using the link in the description, or just buy my book. It's a fantasy book about, well, a lot of stuff. I guarantee it won't suck, and if it does suck, you can find me here and complain about it.